Hello everyone, welcome to my talk today. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I really hope everybody had a really good and delicious lunch, good chats, good meeting fellow friends. My name is Andrei Costin, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here at DefCamp in Cluj. It's my third or fourth DefCamp, and it's always been a pleasure to be back in Romania. I'm Romanian myself, but of course I'll be presenting in English, and I hope that is fine. And well, today I try to present you hacking around with a satellite, aerospace, and avionics, and other systems, maritimes and drones. And the idea we'd like to present is the crashing or exploiting them at the speed of SDR. And SDR stands for Software-Defined Radio, not Sales Development Representative. So welcome to the talk. A very quick, who am I? I have seen familiar faces, hello everyone, which I know or I don't recognize, but if you don't know me, a few words about myself. I'm an assistant professor and senior lecturer at University of Jyvaskyla in central Finland, where I'm doing research in cybersecurity and teaching new generation of talent, masters in cybersecurity, and we develop different research areas, such as the ones that I'll present you today. And at the same time, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Binare.io, which is a spin-off, a cybersecurity spin-off from University of Jyvaskyla itself, living proof that we are doing really cutting-edge and applied research at the university, and we are trying to apply it for the better of a digital world. In general, my research focus are on IoT or industrial IoT, firmware and device analysis, and you might have seen some of my works in terms of my fair classic work, MFAC tool. How many of you have used it in Kali Linux to clone the access cards? Maybe, okay. Maybe something new to try if you are eager to do RFID hacking, some printer hacking back in the day, and CCTV cameras. And of course, this is a mashup talk of some of my research interests in airplanes, maritime and space, aerospace security. So when I talk about IoT, IoT meaning Internet of Things, and for some is just routers. For me, also satellites and aerospace systems and drones and devices are Internet of Things because they are quite connected, and I'll show you why they are important to be assessed and exploited at the speed of SDR these days. Yeah, well, I've been speaking at quite some events, and again, it's my pleasure to be here. Before I continue, I would like to acknowledge the hard work of my master and PhD students because it's a result of 7 papers in academic conferences, which is quite a lot of research work, and their names up there. Without them, this work would not have been possible otherwise, because even though it looks like a slide presentation, it's quite a lot of practical experimental work. This is the agenda I try to propose for today. I'll try to give you a context and a little bit background of the technologies or the terminology that you'll be seeing. Some of the technology and terminology might be new or familiar. I hope you learn something new nevertheless. Then I'll show the setup and results and some key takeaways, and I'll try to conclude with some demos, which I hope you will like. But before I start, maybe a quick audience poll. How many of you are familiar with these terms or some of these terms like SARSAT or ADSB or AAS? Okay, there's some shy hands, okay. And how many of you, for example, run dump 1090 or feed the data to Flight Radar or similar services? Okay, so this is related to ADSB. It's just to get an idea of the knowledge in the room, and I'm always curious about how known are these technologies. So I'll try to take a step back to give you some context about the work we've been doing, and it's actually more than 10 years. It's already 12 years since our first work in ADSB. So ADSB stands for Automatic Dependable Surveillance Broadcast System. It's basically a way that aircrafts, both commercial and private ones, they broadcast information, and not only aircrafts, actually all the vehicles on the airport, on the tarmac, on the tracks, they also have these ADSB transceivers, and they broadcast their information, meaning the type of vehicle it is it an airplane, the flight number, like the one that you see on your boarding pass, and also, very importantly, the speed, the direction, velocity, other sensor information, and GPS, accurate GPS location. So that is more like a collaborative type of radar. Because back in the days, the radars are, or even now, they are still complemented by this, what is called secondary surveillance radars, those huge antennas that are rotating and sending electromagnetic beams into the sky and big objects reflecting it, and then they know there's some object, and then a second stage interrogation by the air traffic control tower going voice channel and asking, hey, are you this flight number? Because they know that this airplane should be going that direction at that particular time. So it's more like a shoot and guess compared the old style, and the new style is more like all the airplane proactively broadcast their information. So the air traffic controllers, but also other airplanes, see who is in the sky and basically take some collision avoidance or other type of air traffic decision. Again, it's a little bit different because they are running from 400 kilometers an hour to whatever, 800, 900 kilometers an hour, so the decisions must be made fast with very accurate information. So that's kind of a very quick introduction to ADS-B. There's a lot of information, but back in the days, as I mentioned, it started with a black hat talk, and there were a lot of information. It was a new system. Back in the day, also, software-defined radios were quite new things. How many of you are familiar with software-defined radios? Okay, quite the same hands, but it's good to know that they're enthusiasts. So these software-defined radios they can be small USB sticks if it's just receive only or receive with a very limited transmission functionality, or bigger ones such as HackRF or BladeRF or Lime SDR or whatever. There are multiple of these open hardware, open source or closed source commercial devices that allow you to basically transmit into the frequency at any frequency range, or almost at any frequency range, any type of waveform and packets, therefore you desire. So you can broadcast FM radio if you have a license, or any other license on our license spectrum information. So back in the day, this ADS-B was quite new, SDR were quite new. It was a very good fit to experiment with both. And the idea is that it was, well, surprisingly, but also unsurprisingly at the time, we discovered that there is no cryptography back there. There is no encryption, there is no digital signature, and if you've been long enough in information security and cybersecurity in general, sending data over the network, whether it's wireless network or cable network, without any digital signature at least, or any encryption, is not a good idea, right? So if you are sending anything in clear text, it's a bad idea because, well, everybody can intercept it and read it. And you might think, well, it's anyway public information. The airplanes are flying, and you can look at the airport website, is okay. But if you think private jets, very wealthy, high net worth individuals, for example, political persons, high value target persons, they fly private jets. And then this kind of confidentiality becomes important, and if everything is in the clear, then it becomes a safety and physical security problem. And surprisingly, I'm not sure how big are the slides, but you see that very high net worth individual recognized that after 10 years, but yeah, somebody tracking his plane, which is using ADS-B, is really a security and safety concern for him. So if you know the story of this, is that there was a student making a tweet bot that was basically tracking this kind of ADS-B data from the open space and then putting it on Twitter, and then that account got repeatedly removed, and it was a big saga. And it shows actually that for this type of persons, confidentiality is very important, and it's broken because the system is not secure, okay? And they find all the other ways to circumvent the lack of security. So this was just another one example, but importantly is the type of research we've done 10 years ago, also compelled ICAO, which is International Civil Aeronautics Organization, to develop at least a cybersecurity task force tasked with developing solutions or looking at risks and solutions for ADS-B type of systems. And again, these are not your standard TCP/IP or internet type of networks. So these are broadcast, clear text, RF, globally available. So anyone from the other end of the world with a very good transmitter or very well-positioned transmitter or flying drones can inject data at any other point in the world, okay? Or collect the data. So it's not like they have to be physically there, okay? So that's like a complete different type of risk than the internet where you have the IP address, okay? So that's kind of a mindset shift where this cybersecurity is really important. So we have shown that at that Black Hat talk, again, unsurprisingly, replaying is possible. So basically, you capture a valid packet of I don't know, Air Force One airplane, and yes, it has a unique identifier, and it's known. So if you really want, you can spoof Air Force One flying over some friendly or unfriendly country, and you can see that it can become a geopolitical additional tension point unnecessarily because the technology allows it. Spoofing, well, pretty easy. Also, the packets are quite small, 56 bits, 112 bits. There's no cryptography involved, so anyone can craft the packet and then send it by SDR into the Ethereum, and that's it. And then snooping and stalking, the example that I gave, that, for example, you can track various people or make correlation of people flying together to different meetings, and this has been the case. It has also been good that some investigative journalists have found collusion between different political or economic parties that shouldn't be in conflict of interest because they arrive at very, very close air tracks at certain, let's say, Geneva events or other events, and they fly at the same time from the same points and so on. So it's easier to track this kind of activity, so it's a good thing somehow, but it doesn't mean that we should abolish crypto in order to catch all the criminals, but we should actually do better technology in this way. Fast forward 5 years, there was a very interesting news. It was very brief. It was more like, it was very weird because there were not a lot of technical details, but DHS, and it's not DHL, but it's DHS, so it's Department of Homeland Security, and you can imagine they are quite interested in both defense capabilities, but also in attack capabilities, and they've released a news piece that, without going into the details, that they've remotely hacked a Boeing 757 sitting on a runway. They don't say whether it was through ADSB or SAT communication, or it was Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything, but it was remote. So this is what we know. It means that they are looking into these kind of attacks for defending or for attacking other unfriendly airplanes. And it means that there is interest and there is definitely some work going on. And it's also encouraging to see that we are not doing this, an imaginary problem search in this sense. So yeah, if you know that this cat kind of has a cheeseburger, kind of has a remote RC for any Boeing or airplane. Yeah, small parenthesis, if you have seen the Boeing problems recently with their software updates and lack of software quality that led to crashes, then you can think that these kind of combinations can then be used by sophisticated attackers for different purposes. And yet again, 4 or 5 years forward, then there is a high-ranking general in Space Force in US giving a very ample interview. Again, you can check the links and the interview itself, and they mentioned that for the last, basically since the let's say almost the Crimea invasion, 2014, there's been increasing number of attacks on their commercial and military and government satellites, and usually those attacks in the past have been most likely like either mechanical or kinetic interactions, trying to maneuver too close to them, or do some kind of laser blinding or laser jamming, meaning that these satellites, if they are military, they have quite strong optics. So if you blind them with very strong lasers, then they cannot see the military intelligence. But more recently, they have found that also the cybersecurity type of attacks are being used, whether their frequencies are being jammed or their frequencies are being brute forced for various types of protocols, and ground stations and so on are being also targeted because they are a point to access the satellite. So if there is an operator of ground stations, for example, in various countries or regions, there are different ones, private and also public governmental ones. Then there are direct pivots to the tracking or actually operating the satellite. So again, there's another direction of interest in this space. So with all this background, kind of very quick introduction, if you want to take a photo of this, these are all the papers that are kind of squeezed together to put this talk. These are more like academic style papers, those two-column papers that you read one page and you go asleep. So if you cannot go easy to sleep, I recommend reading one of these. But they are also really good technical introduction to the topic and what we do and how we do. And they are all basically focused around the topic of applied cybersecurity to aviation, avionics, aerospace and satellites, maritime and drones, and for the purpose of doing exploitation or, if you will, RF or radio frequency pen testing, okay? Because we have SDR, we have packet specification, we have data specification, and we can do this. And usually it's not very easy to do because, well, you have to implement all these protocols. Again, it's not a Wireshark available for this kind of protocols. You have to write your own, but I'll go into details a little bit later. And then, of course, you have to have the devices in order to do this. And also you have to have a lab or an environment where you can safely do this. If you start doing this at your kitchen, maybe it's not a very good idea because, you know, some authority will ring your door maybe 5 minutes later asking why you're sending, you know, spoofed ADSB signals because you are interfering with nearby airport or military station. So please, kids, don't do this at home, okay, as they say in the movies. So very quick for the ones who are very interested in the technical details. So ADSB that I'll be talking about is automatic dependable system broadcast. It works on 2 frequencies. Well, 1090 megahertz frequency is the most common known one, where the airplanes or traffic control towers or vehicles in the airport, they send their information, they broadcast. But there's also the 1030, which is the interrogation. You can think of it as a radio frequency ping reply. So on 1030, the air traffic control or other airplanes can send a request, hey, can you give me your ADSB information? And then they'll reply 1090, okay, here's my information that you've requested. And you can already figure out that if some attacker wants, they can craft a 1030 interrogation packet and ask different kind of maybe less common type of information from the aircraft, and aircraft will happily give it because they don't know who sent the request. They always assume it's a trusted party. It's another airplane or it's another traffic control tower. And they'll always reply. And yeah, there are many packets or types and the information fields that can be interrogated and, you know, get a lot of information from a very unsuspecting private or commercial or other type of aircraft. ACARS is pretty much similar system, but it is a little bit older. It works on these VHF frequencies, 129, 137. It stands for Aircraft Communication and Reporting System. I think it's, if ADSB started to be commissioned about 2010 or developed 2010 and commissioned 2012, then ACARS maybe is there from the 90s or 80s. And you can think of ACARS more like, it's still a digital system. It's radio frequency based, but it encodes digital packets. There are kind of fields and determined length and bit slicing and bit codes and bit rates and so on. But the idea is that it's communication reporting system. So it sends the weather report. It also sends kind of, you can think of it as an SMS or a fax between the traffic control and aircraft or aircraft and aircraft. Back in the days, okay, if they need to send some text, okay, can you give me the weather report for this airport? Or they need to send an emergency, like we have a sick passenger on board, can you prepare, for example, an ambulance? They would send this through aircraft. Now they can do this, they can send this through ADSB and also voice channels, but sometimes voice channels are interfering or they're not available. They are like different constraints, so they use multiple channels to send the same information. What's interesting is that this ACARS is also still used, but it was very, very actively used in the 90s and early 2000s. For example, if you fly, especially long flights, and you have these things to purchase on board, like, okay, alcohol or, for example, duty-free, you swipe your card, and then there was no global internet coverage from the satellites, or not all the terminals in the airplane were like online authentication. You would swipe your magnetic card, and then they would have your information on file. So you get the goods, and what happens is that the stewards, they would go in their back room and then send all the credit card information to the traffic control tower and say, hey, to their corporate office of a company, for example, if it's, I don't know, Tarom. Then they'll say, can you run this card through a payment system and see if they have funds and you can authorize this amount. And guess what? ACARS is also clear text, right? So what it means that these credit card numbers and personal details and date of birth and expiration days, they've been flying near our ears like for tens of years. So if you don't have to do very sophisticated attacks, just put some good antenna here and there, and you could have collected like gazillions of cards back in the day. And it's a real story. There's a paper, academic paper, looking into that matter, like what type of information is being transferred through this ACAR data system. Then, if you are interested, shoot me an email. I can direct you to the right paper to read and the findings from there. Then we have AIS, which is Automatic Identification System. It's pretty much similar to ADSB, but it is used for maritime ships. So basically all the cargo, all the big ships, carnival ships, cruise ships, yachts, even small boats, they have this AIS. They have it for receive, but also they have to send identification. For example, when they are approaching a port, that they are coming to the port, or they have authorization to go to particular regions. And also they broadcast a lot of other information. For example, emergency services, if they have an emergency, they would broadcast their AIS information with the location and the type of emergency and any other type. So you can also do the same type of attacks on ships and yachts of both commercial and private types of ships. Now, how it relates to satellites and space? Well, even though it's quite unseen because you think that airplanes just go by themselves and there's the airports and traffic control towers, or there are maritime ships and they go by the sea and there's the ports, but of course there are regions in the world where there is no such infrastructure very close. Usually these are the big oceans or the big mountainous areas. And what it means that there is a need for satellites that would capture those signals, and then they would relay those signals to the nearest Earth place, like Earth ground control station, that would process that information. So for ADSB, there are many vendors, Aerion, GomSpace, Allenspace, Nano Avionics, which could do and operate satellites with ADSB payload. What it means it's a satellite, basically, and a payload on a satellite. When you have a satellite, you might have a couple payloads. A payload is a specific unit of functionality. It can be a camera to do, photo of the Earth. It can be some measurement mechanism to measure the radiation. It can also be just an SDR in space. It's basically, essentially an SDR in space that receives ADSB data, processes it in real time, or many times it doesn't even process it. It just takes it and then mirrors it back to the next satellite or back to the Earth without doing any processing. So there are different ways these signals from the attacker or from the aircraft or from the traffic control tower can go through the satellite system. So they are kind of interconnected. So you can think of this as a heterogeneous interconnected network, because you interconnect satellite and satellite networks with systems that are not satellite, like ADSB and AIS. So the same goes for ACARS, meaning that, for example, the airplanes, when they go through the place where there is no airport or air traffic control tower, again, usually these are the transoceanic, transatlantic, transpacific flights. There is no ground station nearby, so they'll send stuff through the satellite, which will then send to another satellite or send it back to nearest space ground station. And pretty much similar to the airplanes, the ships, they are also out of reach of any land, and then they would send their AIS signals to the satellites. which will relay them to ground station here. And the ground station can be completely separate, or it can be integrated with AAS service provider and coastal station, which is basically the port system. So I'm not quite sure in Constanța how it works, but I'm pretty sure they have quite big AAS system there because they have to. It's a quite important hub for naval communication in the Black Sea and Danube. So I would assume if somebody is from those organizations, they know better. So I would really be interested to talk and have a coffee. And then we also have in this talk, it's kind of, again, a mashup. We have the COSPAS SARSAT, which is purely a satellite-based system. And we have the COSPAS SARSAT, it means Search and Rescue, SAR, satellite-aided tracking. So what it means that it's a system developed for tracking emergency situations, or let's say crash situations, crashed airplanes, crash boats, or missing persons, or persons in unreachable areas. For example, they do for extreme sport or in hiking areas where there's no mobile communication, there's no network, there's no internet, and there's no way to send an SOS. So this is a way to send an SOS through the satellite. So this is what is called a COSPAS SARS system. So there are a couple of types of devices. Again, I'm mentioning this here because there are many protocols that are similar, but there are many different protocols in COSPAS SARSAT specification, which is quite huge, that encode different pieces of information depending on the scenario or depending on the device, and I'll show you examples of the devices. So there is EPRB, which is Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon. It's a device, it's an orange device that usually stays on every major type of boat. So if you have a small boat or yacht, or you go on cruise ships, if you look at the end, margin of the rails, or where the emergency escape boats are, there will be these orange beacons. I'll show you an example later. But if you know what to look for after this presentation, then you'll start noticing them quite often, to be honest. Then there's the ELT, Emergency Locator Transmitter. These are similar type of device, but they are usually not orange. They could also be orange for easy detection reasons. Again, similar to the aircraft, the black box is called black box, but it's actually orange in general, so it's easy to spot in adverse weather conditions. And emergency locator transmitter is placed on board of aircraft. It might have different colors, not necessarily orange, but it serves the same purpose, that it will send an SOS type of signals through the SARSAT, and I'll show you in the next slide how the system works. And then there's personal locator beacon is kind of a, personal, it means it's for persons. So if you're going to a place where you think you will need a risk, backup, then this is a good thing to have. In general, some of the cheapest cost from 99 euros. They are certified. You can buy them on Amazon. And personally, it can make a difference between life and death. So it's usually a very good investment. Again, they do not work in all the countries. I'll show the map where they work. But in general, it covers a good deal of countries because this COSPAS SARS system is a consortium or association based of 76 countries with quite large coverage, and there are many satellites that are around the world. So this is an example how COSPAS SARSAT system looks in general. And again, this is quite simplified schematics because the technical flow is much more complex. But here are examples of emergency. For example, this is ELT, aircraft emergency locator transmitter. There is the hiker or extreme sport adventurer who has a PLB, personal location beacon, and then there are the cruise ships, yachts, and cargo ships that have the CPRB, emergency positioning indicated radio beacon, and all they send basically signals at 406 megahertz. This is the main frequency, so you can already, if you have an SDR, maybe you go home today and start listening on 406 and see if there are any emergency going on. Again, some of these emergencies that you might have see tonight if you go and check your SDRs could be just test beacons, meaning that when you buy a device, you have to test it. And what it means, it will send a test packet so that it can be seen by the national center, and I'll show you exactly what happens. So when this type of beacon is actually activated, it sends a 406 signal to a network of satellites, including a lot of information, but it also includes the GPS and exact location, or sometimes not very exact location because there is no GPS coverage. So there are other ways that these devices can detect their location, and I'll show you how many protocols are there for encoding location. Like, GPS, how many other protocols do you know to encode location? Okay, but there are about 8 different ways of how the location can be encoded and deducted or deduced in this kind of situation. It's not only GPS-based. So they send the information to the satellite networks. They'll send all this information to LUT, which is a local user terminal. Well, it's a big antenna with a very switch-like looking device. It's usually made by big companies, well, Cisco of the satellite world. And then these are connected through some fiber link or network connectivity, like normal connectivity to control center or like management control center. And what this management control center will do, it will receive the signal, will look up the ID of the device, and will understand, well, this beacon is from country X, and it belongs to citizen Y or to the company Y or boat Y, and so on. And then based on that, they will send information to the specific country. Or again, the situation can be difficult because it could be a boat or an airplane or a person who has an emergency in a third country or in some neutral waters. So they have to make a decision which emergency services to contact, but nevertheless, there is a quite convoluted communication between Management Control Center and RCC. RCC is basically Rescue Control Center, which is the equivalent of Emergency Response Center like 112. When you call 112, is equivalent of RCC. And they'll make a decision, okay, we need to send 2 helicopters, 24 paramedics, I don't know how many Navy SEALs and so on, depending on the situation that occurs, right? So, and then these helicopters or ships or other combined means will go and search the area. Hopefully they have the exact location and have visual confirmation. But again, if it's not exact GPS location, it's some kind of, okay, an area of 2 kilometers square. It is windy, it is fire, it is at the night. Then the search can be very difficult. And the problem here, like the main problem is, guess what? 406, is it encrypted or not? Not. Okay, yes, it's not encrypted. And there are good reasons for that because generally this kind of, and also no digital signature. So everything is in the clear text and there is no digital signature of messages and packets. And usually in these critical systems like ADSB, AIS, COSPAS, SARSAT, they are critical systems, so safety is #1 priority. Security is not safety, okay? Safety is #1 priority. They need to save lives. And there are many things that can go wrong with security. Expired certificate, incorrectly configured private keys, scrambled packets, missing bits, cannot decrypt data. So they might have a risk that the packet is undecodable, okay, or untrustworthy. And then to avoid this kind of risk and make a decision, everything is in the clear text. But, well, there is no easy solution to that. But this is one of the reasons why these systems are designed with clear text and no digital signature in the first place. Now, going back one step is that an attacker who has transmitting SDR can easily craft this kind of 406 packets and start sending them around and triggering like alerts to different countries that would send their helicopters and ships to fake rescue services. And you might say, well, they might decide not to send. But then it's similar to 112. If you call and say, you say, have an emergency, they'll say, no, we don't trust you, we will not send anybody, and some people die. It's a decision that they have to always send for an emergency. And then, after that, they will see if it was fake or not. So here, you can imagine an attacker doing this for different countries, hundreds of times, and then the whole system becomes clogged, denial of service, and all the rescue resources are exhausted. These are kind of some examples from around the world when people using EPRB or ELTs or PLBs have saved their life or the life of their loved ones. These are good examples. Again, an idea is always good to have, but also it comes with, even if you're not an attacker, you are just a normal obeying user, it happens this kind of news that false distress signal from small recreational boats and aircraft sending Canada's stretch search and rescue operators on hundreds of wild goose chases each year at the cost of millions of dollars. Because what happens is that these devices are disposed, they are not disposed properly. So they are abandoning them to junkyards, and basically what happens, sometimes the battery is leaking or the button is being physically pushed by the other garbage around, and then it activates, and then the rescue service goes to some garbage site thinking that there is a rescue, okay? And they should respond to that. And that's kind of another part of the story, that even if you are not a malicious attacker, you can still do damage to the system. And basically, this is just an example, a single rescue mission example at the minimum cost around $2 million US dollars on average, because there's a lot of technical and also human resources and activation procedures that happen, and it costs quite a lot. And for example, for Canada SARSAT operations, they used 47 millions so far, and then they have just 200 millions of support, so it's a very expensive system. This is a map where you can see which are the countries and general the regions where you can get this course pass SARSAT, let's say, support or coverage, including the maritime spaces. Okay, so some specifications. There's a lot of specifications, so you can imagine, because it's a complex system, there are operational specifications, meaning that what should happen in case this type of signal comes, and what should happen when this kind of other emergency comes, and so on. These are operational specifications, and they are interesting, but it's not kind of technical. We want technical specification, meaning that we want to know the packet structures, we want to know the bits, so that we can start sending, you know, reality looking like packets, or fuzz the system with SDRs. That's the whole goal. Can we fake it? And yeah, well, the answer is, yeah, you've guessed it, we can fake it, but I'll show you examples, but yeah, indeed we can fake it. Just to give you an idea of the complexity of the protocols, if you look at the specification, technical specification 007 of this COSPAS SARSAT, some of them are available online, some are not. So if you do quite extensive Googling, you'll find a lot of information. So just for the location protocols, as I mentioned, there are 8 different ways to encode or compute location and encode it into a signal. So you can already see a lot of potential where the attacker can play with the fields, right? They can encode different, let's say, wrong type of information, or put fuzzed bits here and there. Then there's a lot of other data fields that are user-based, they are not specification-based, and there's a lot of fuzzing potential there as well. Very quick show of how the specs look like. So there are 2 types of packets. There's a short message and a long message. One is 112 bits and another is 144 bits. Well, the main difference is that the 144 bits has a second data field, or PDF2. In general, otherwise, they are quite similar. And again, all that location information and identification information and all the other emergency-related or specific information go into this PDF1 and PDF2. And you can also see that there are country codes, meaning that, well, the country is a hard-coded number, usually in ISO standard numbering system, that says, okay, this beacon is registered in country X. For example, if I have a boat in Finland, I would have this EPRB registered to the Finnish authority that manages these systems, and if I activate it, then this ID will show up in any system in the world, and they'll know, okay, I have to contact first Finnish Maritime Authority and ask, is this person real one? And do you know anything about them? And we have an emergency from this person. Do you have any other contact information? And basically a lot of back and forth. Okay, so there's a lot of theoretical stuff that I have shown you, and it took us quite some years to build a lab that we, well, it started 2012, as I mentioned, but we've been collecting devices and also technology and specification and so on, and implementing different testing and fuzzing software. But the idea is that we have a lab. Again, it's not a lab in the purest sense of a lab. It's like a research living lab. If you've been to a university research living lab, where there's a lot of things moving around, but nevertheless, we have a set of devices. This is just an example of a couple of SDRs that we can use in parallel. We have a couple of different Blade RF variants and versions, hardware evolutions. We have HackerFs, Pluto SDRs, and a bunch of RTL SDRs, which are receive-only, just for testing. And the idea of our lab is to have an Faraday enclosure. Well, Faraday enclosure is not a new thing. It's been there for a lot of time, and it's kind of a de facto thing to be used when you do some RF testing or RF experimentation, just to make sure that you don't interfere with anything that you don't need to interfere or you are not allowed to interfere. These Faraday cages, which is the orange box in this schematic, can be a huge room like this, which would cost millions to build actually or maintain, or it can cost like hundreds to thousands of euros to be in a bag format. So this is an example of a disk lab type of bag. It's a fully military grade box. It's used by digital forensics experts, police, military, and normally everything you put inside, it will block any RF signal, and you have these protecting gloves that you can operate different devices inside, including touch screens and button-based, and you have also shielding transparent part that you can see what's happening on the device. So it's completely isolated, and for example, if you have to do some testing on RF stuff, you put it inside and it will run just fine. Then, but ideally you have a very professional room. Then you also can have some leakage EM or electromagnetic and RF field leakage monitor, which is good to have handy just to make sure to see that you don't have any signals leaking out of your Faraday bag, whether it's a room or the bag, so that you're, it's a double safety, like ceinture bretelle, like they say in France. You have both. And then we put these SDRs connected to our software platform, which is generally Python-based, but it can be a combination of MATLAB and Python, and depending on the protocols. And then we start testing. You see the out antenna and the input antennas. They are not technically like super exact drawings, but you get the idea. And then the maritime components, avionics components, satellite components will get, this kind of signals and will react differently. So these are some devices actually that we have. We have a bunch of ADS-B devices. All these are ADS-B devices. And what it means these devices are not, so there are two types of aviation, or well, there are many types of aviation, but there are two common types. Commercial aviation, which are basically airlines, Tarom or Air France or KLM, and there is like GA or general aviation, which are like privately owned aircraft or business jets or smaller aircraft like that. The commercial aircrafts, they have basically quite bigger systems from Collins Aerospace or Airbus or something else, or Lockheed Martin, some bigger box with completely different characteristics. And they are hard actually to buy. Even if you have a budget, it's not easy to go to any online market and buy those things, because you need to have basically an airline license. Generally, they ask for that. But these ones, because anyone can buy a private jet in general, I mean, you don't need, except money, you don't need too much licensing there. You can buy, it's not necessarily that you will fly it, so you can buy an airplane. So therefore, this market is more relaxed, and you can buy these kind of devices to put on your airplane. And actually, this is mandatory in many parts of the world, but any private or smaller jet, privately owned jet, must have an ADS-B device already from 2020. So it's a mandatory thing, so that's why the market is quite liberal and the prices are good. We have a lot of these devices. These devices, you can see they don't have usually screens. So any guesses how they work? What is the screen? Well, you connect them to your iPad or tablet or phone, and basically you put all this convoluted construction on the dashboard of airplane. Now, if you think about this, there's an RF interface that goes into these devices, and then it connects to your phone. Can you see any problem here? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, I'll show you the demo, but I guess you get the idea what happens when you connect this kind of systems to your phone, and especially if you're a very wealthy individual or you're a pilot, you have a pilot, and they are connected to wealthy individuals. They fly a lot of these important people, or it's a general pilot. We also have a satellite. I'll show you a demo of the satellite. It's a flatbed satellite. It means that it just lays on the research table, it's not flying, but this is a CubeSat. Basically, it's one unit of Cube satellite. It has different boards here, which have different payloads. So basically, as I mentioned to you, a payload is a board or a system of boards that do some measurement or receive or transmit signals. And I'll show you some attacks on the satellite. We have also a drone, and this one is the EPRB. This is the orange thing that I've been telling you. So whenever you go to a cruise ship next time, or to a yacht, or any kind of maritime boat, look for these guarding rails, and you'll see these orange things there because they are mandatory, and yeah, ideally not pushing any buttons. So I'll skip this, is from our table. Basically, we show how our lab compares to other labs in the academia. I think, well, it's interesting. If you want to learn more, you can always ask me details, but we focus on the satellite, aviation, and maritime. We don't do GPS attacks. There are labs who are specialized on GPS attacks and spoofing and jamming and anti-jamming and so on. Then we also use this lab, for example, to practice and demonstrate actually the Log4j attack. Everyone familiar with Log4j attack? Yeah, well, quite many hands, not so shy, that's good. So what happens is that, well, Log4j, you send through the internet, local network, Wi-Fi, whatever, you send the packet, hopefully you catch something, it hits a vulnerable server, you get command control back. Now, usually you have to be in those networks, and yeah, again, you have to know where the servers are. Here, what we did use an input interface with ACARS, ADSB, and AIS. So for example, think about this. If you have an airport or maritime port, and they have vulnerable servers that are not connected to the internet, they are internal, but they have interfaces receiving packets from ADSB and AIS and ACARS and COSPAS SARSAT, they will process those informations and still store to some log. And what we've simulated is basically we've implemented this minimal system with vulnerable Log4j library, and then we send ADSB packets, ACARS packets, COSPAS SARSAT packets, and AIS packets with Log4j vector, and we've got quite successful in triggering a command and control back to the attacker. So these interfaces are often overlooked and maybe not included in the pen testing of organizations, but they can easily be used, and they are actually the easier target than going through the VPN, two-factor authentication, internet, and reaching maybe eventually a vulnerable server on some port. I'll skip this because I'm running close on time, but again, these are excerpts from the paper, those 7 papers or 8 papers that I've mentioned. These are just numbers, but the main point are more than 50% in any setup and configuration we've tested. So we've tested a lot of hardware combined with a lot of software, combined with different operating systems, and more than 50% of the tested configurations, they are vulnerable to at least some sort of attack, meaning denial of service, crash, hang, unresponsive. Again, some people might see this not very important, but when you are flying an airplane 1,000 kilometers an hour, and you need to make a split decision thing, or you need to be focused on many screens, and some of your screens reboot or basically crash or hang, maybe it's not a very good or a safe system, okay? And this goes to any kind of maritime ship and other types. Here, for example, I want to show you another example why our work is important. I'm not sure if you see quite well. Maybe you can see if you're in front rows, but there's one particular important keyword that would send some chills down some spines. Can you spot it quickly in the diagram? Maybe I leave you 5 seconds. Yeah, it's a lot of text. It's a real system. It's a system that you put in a private jet. And the keyword is here. So you can see that there is an autopilot. Okay? So autopilot out. So, and when you look, okay, this is an integrated avionic unit. It's an avionics unit which makes a decision on some airplanes, on some systems. And it goes to autopilot. That's fine. That's how it's supposed to work. But then if you look what is the input to this unit, well, I think it's ADSB, right? So now, if you think about from pen testing point of view, like ADSB is insecure, everybody can send, and I'm pretty sure there could be some bugs. I'm not saying there are bugs, but there could be some bugs. And you don't want your autopilot be hit by random ADSB packets down there. So, and this is, I mean, just a random example from this kind of private business jets that I found openly on the internet. Okay, a lot of future work that we want to do or are interested, CCSDS for space, FLARM for drones and UAVs. Maybe you know FLARM already. Remote ID is not equivalent to FLARM, but it's similar in United States. It's a standard for drone identification and other ADSB-like systems. I'll skip a lot of these because, yeah, I want to show you the demos. But for example, for COSPAS RSAT, there's not so many softwares to play with because it's a very specific system. I mean, you don't often see the software systems used in 112 call service online to play with because, well, they are critical. So usually you don't have a lot of this COSPAS RSAT software lying around on the internet. Some are more like educational or kind of research-based. But as you can see, we can basically spoof all kinds of ePRB and ELT and other PLB type of protocols with, you know, country and IDs. We can spoof Elon Musk's whatever if somebody wants to, right? I mean, it's clear text, no digital signature. It's pretty easy to put those 144 bits together and just send them anyway. And again, you know, you have cheap drones with cheap RTL SDRs. They can be flying around and sending this kind of packets on any frequency. So it's pretty interesting type of attacks that are possible. Need for message and authentication, need for message freshness, so that there's no replay attacks, randomized and confidential IDs. These are really hard problems to solve in this kind of broadcast, big number of critical mobile node system. So we don't have a definitive answer. We try to propose different solutions. Some of our space security workshop paper, again, some interesting read. This is from this year. If you're interested, we try to use digital signature and ECDSS and so on, ECDSA. But yeah, I try to show you the demos because time is running out. So let me start with satellite communication crash. So what happens here, I'll be talking while it shows. Basically, we have a satellite and it has two communicating boards. So it's ground station to the satellite. These boards are educational. They use 433 megahertz or something like that. They're unlicensed spectrum, but they normally use KU band or other bands, other higher frequency bands. The idea is that these boards have different protocols to communicate with each other. And the idea is that this board simulates the ground station, like the one with the big antenna that communicates with the satellite. And similar board is in the satellite that I'll show you later. But you can see here that this board is operating and is blinking like a LED. And normally it has, I'm not sure you can see, but it has reset GS, which is reset ground station. So it has a software reset functionality. And then when you trigger it, it will reset the board. Then by fuzzing, we found some exploit that when we sense certain type of packets, it goes into a hard or temporary permanent denial of service. So the only way to reset the board is to reboot it by unplugging the power. But if it's a flying satellite, I guess it's really hard to easily unplug the power on a satellite which is flying around. But you'll see the thing. So we have the reset, and you see that when we do the reset, it's still blinking. It was a red blink, meaning reset occurred. It goes a little bit fast. And then we have the crash.py, which means we send the crashing packet. Again, we have to obfuscate a little bit the code. And then what you see here, that this will stop blinking. So you see it stopped blinking. What it means that basically it's not communicating anymore, okay? And the first thing you think, okay, let's do a reset. But you see that it's not coming back. So it's still not blinking even after reset ground station. So the only way is to disconnect it and then connect it back and to go through the whole reboot mode, and then it will start blinking again. Okay. So again, this is an example of and then we can crash it again, and an attacker can do this endlessly. They just put the crash code in a loop, and then somebody will have to go spacewalk every time to catch a satellite and reboot it. This is just an example which works. And then this is the final demo, which is a compilation of all the, well, not all, but majority of ADSB crashes and AIS crashes that we've tested with different devices. So you can see this is the screen, which is a phone or tablet connected to one of those devices that I have shown you earlier. So these are getting connected to, to different combinations of this. So we connect every of these devices to different software. There are like dozens of software that are available. Some are free, some are paid, cost quite a lot of money. So, and we start sending, and you see that application crash. Yeah, maybe the audio is not there for some reason, but anyway. And, okay, yeah. This is the sound that we've added, but yeah, it's just to make it a little bit more fun. So you see, we've sent 500,000 of ADSB messages, and the idea is to show you that most of the software, all the software is different, and we can do this all day long. It was really fun, and for an attacker, it costs nothing because they'll just keep crashing, yeah. And that's kind of a little bit, let's say, scary. And a couple more, if you have the patience. Again, iPhone, Android, doesn't matter the vendor of the software, doesn't matter the hardware behind it, because it's ADSB, should be standard. Couple more. And the last crash will have its original sound, not this one, but the next one, I guess, will have its own original sound from the software. This is the original one. So it makes this noise and then crashes. And yeah, I think that's it. I have 3 minutes. I know it's a little bit tight. Maybe there's room for one question, but thank you for the attention. And it was really a pleasure to present to you today. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, there's a question, yes? Just 1 second, yeah?
Hi, I was wondering, is the IQ fuzzing, the framework that you presented on your slides, open source or something? Can we see how it's wired up to GNU Radio?
No, it's not open source. I mean, to be honest, it's not, let's say, rocket science. It's pretty much creating the IQ files. It's creating the IQ files and then sending it through the normal HackerRef or LimeSDR. This is the simplest example that we use. We can also do it live, but it's like directly through the GNU Radio or even without GNU Radio, because these boards have their own way to send data as raw data. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not open source because, yeah, well, for various reasons. It's just a matter of putting the packets, fast packets or not fast packets according to the specs, and usually it's not extremely difficult, I would say. Yeah, maybe one more question, last one. I'm not sure, maybe the organizers can say if it's the last one or not, but I think
Is there any roadmap to improve these standards, as far as you know?
Well, not as far as I know. There are task forces in these organizations established, like ICAO organization and also the Maritime organization. There are technical challenges because these systems are already deployed and billions have been put into, airports, maritime ports, aircraft, ships. So it takes a lot of money to replace all that. Yeah, I mean, it's one idea, but then it comes with all the cost of additional PKI infrastructure, failback scenarios, what happens. So from what we know, there is no clear path. What is worse, actually, is not that there is no clear path. You have seen all these crashes, and except one company that replied, yeah, we will look into this, nobody else replied. That's the worst question. I mean, even if you have standards, if you send them crash details or crash videos and they say, don't even reply and are not interested, then I think that's what we should fix first. Maybe, I don't know. Okay. Oh, one more question. Yeah. Happy to see a lot of questions.
Has this kind of research been weaponized?
Well, not that we are aware of, but I have a suspicion that similar techniques could be already being used in Ukraine because actually it's a radio electronic warfare systems are quite big priority there, and they're actively being used, and counter radio electronic warfare systems are also being employed. So I would not exclude the fact that this type of packet level attacks and spoofing attacks are being used to some degree, not just pure jamming, because pure jamming is very old and it's been known. There are countermeasures to jamming, meaning there are chipsets that are frequency hopping or spread spectrum, and they are not susceptible to jamming of all the spectrum, right? So I guess there's some kind of application level or, let's say, intermediate middleware level happening there. This is my suspicion, but I would not exclude this. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, enjoy the rest of DefCamp.
If you don't have any more questions, our sponsor, CyberHacks, is preparing a demo in the parking lot if you guys want to go see it. Thank you.
Yes, and before you leave the room, there are feedback papers. I've been asked by organizers, kindly leave your feedback to the papers.